Okay, I'll call to order the Wednesday, October 21st meeting of Narberth Borough Council, 7:33 p.m. Mr. Metric, could you please call the roll?
Sure. Ms. Rickards? Ms. Pananopoulos?
Here.
Mr. Bush?
Here.
Mr. McGreevy?
Here.
Ms. Elshett?
Here.
Mr. Weisbord?
Here.
President Mutrick?
Here.
And we are joined this evening by Solicitor John Walco as well.
Okay, thank you. Solicitor Walco, in honor of your new appointment to Kilkenny Law, will you lead us in the pledge?
I already did that for that, but I'm happy to do it again.
Well, I'm just going to keep calling on you.
I pledge allegiance to the flag
Flag.
United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands,
one
nation,
under God,
Visible.
liberty and justice for all.
For all.
for all. Thank you. And Chief Gallagher, thank you for attending. I hope you are feeling on the mend. I know you had a tough weekend.
Yeah, I am. Thank you, Aaron. I'm feeling much better, and I'd like to thank everybody for reaching out to me via text and phone call. Believe me, I've been overwhelmed for the support from myself and my family, and none more importantly than Mayor Deutsch and Sean, who have been in contact with me every day via text or phone call since this occurred. So I'm very lucky to be here. I feel very fortunate, and I'm ready to get back to work.
Thank you so much. All right. I have no comments at this time. Ms. Mayor, do you have a report?
Just briefly, we have Halloween coming up, and I put this on social media, but I just for those who don't get Facebook or that information, just want to let folks know that the borough does not regulate how people will celebrate the holiday. So people are going to choose to do it as they wish. Would issue some guidelines, some general guidelines to keep people safe. We're going to ask that people go out in small groups with members of their household and others that they're regularly exposed to. Keep it smaller. Ask that folks wear a mask covering their nose and mouth, both the candy givers and the trick-or-treaters, so that everybody stays safe. When somebody knocks on the door, knock on the door back up 6 feet and give some space and have the candy tossed to you, just so that we don't have people in each other's face. Give some sort of clear indication if you want to participate in the holiday. Put up a lit pumpkin or some kind of indication, a sign that you want to participate. And if the trick-or-treaters go to a house and there's no lights on and there's nothing that indicates they want to participate, please keep walking, because there are some people who are not comfortable celebrating the holiday, and we want to respect those neighbors as well. So have fun, be safe, and that's it for Halloween. During the last meeting, I also asked that homeowners who had overgrowth over our sidewalks, please make sure and cut the overgrowth back, so we have clear sidewalks for people walking up and down, and especially if we're going to have trick-or-treaters and people walking up and down the sidewalks, please make sure to clear those paths and make it easy for everybody to cross. And that's it.
Okay, thank you so much. I will now ask Solicitor Walco to take over, and we will recess this meeting and open a public hearing.
Thank you, President Mutrick. Yes, we'll adjourn the meeting and we will commence at this time the public hearing on Ordinance 1027. This is an ordinance, a temporary face covering ordinance that essentially will create this temporary ordinance that will mandate the wearing of face coverings in certain times and certain locations throughout the borough, which I'll discuss in more detail, and also extend the borough's emergency declaration, which was commenced in March. I have 4 exhibits for this hearing. First, Board Exhibit 1 is the ordinance itself. Board Exhibit 2 is the legal notice for tonight's hearing. Board Exhibit 3 is the proof of publication, which is done in the Mainline Times for tonight's hearing, which was published on October 4th, 2020. The hearing was also promoted on the borough website and circulated through social media. The legal notice did include notification that it would be held telecommunicatively with information to the public on how to participate or ask questions about the ordinance, or participate in the hearing. Board Exhibit 4 is the proof of the attested ordinance being submitted to the Montgomery County Law Library, which was marked received by the Law Library on September 28th, 2020. So again, this is a temporary ordinance that is designed to last during the time of the borough's emergency declaration and no longer. This is not the first, or I should say, Narberth Borough is not the first municipality in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania to pass an ordinance like this. In fact, Westchester Borough, I believe, passed their ordinance about 2 weeks ago, also having a gatherings restriction, which this ordinance does not have. This ordinance, as it's set forward in the preamble, is designed in response to or in cooperation with the federal and state mandates and studies and all of the orders that have come out of the Commonwealth, particularly from Governor Wolf and the Department of Health, trying to get the coronavirus pandemic under control. Of note is a July 15th order from Governor Wolf, which requested that the local officials assist the Commonwealth in enforcing these orders for face coverings. The term face covering is defined in this ordinance. So anytime you see the word face covering, you have to look back to the definition. It's very similar to the definition that was provided in one of the Commonwealth's orders. It does provide a little bit more specificity, but it certainly does not conflict with what the Commonwealth considers a proper face covering. In fact, the entire ordinance itself is designed to work with and again create that enforcement mechanisms that the Commonwealth orders don't have necessarily. They have the law in place, but again, the governor is looking for more local officials to work with the enforcement. It doesn't conflict with it. It does add, again, the enforcement provisions, certainly not redundant or duplicative in that manner. And again, through the borough's health, safety, and welfare powers that are given to the borough from the Commonwealth, it fits within those rights to do so. This ordinance specifically has a warning for any offense for the first time. For persons in violation, it's a $15 fine. That's 1.5. For businesses or persons responsible for businesses, again, in violation of this ordinance, there is a warning, but again, a $50 and then $100 fine for those businesses. Again, once they are warned of the requirements. There are certainly exceptions in the ordinance. Of exceptions again that were in the Commonwealth exceptions and some additional exceptions that make sense for the borough of Narberth. The 5 areas really where this applies to the borough of Narberth would be inside or upon the grounds of any business. So inside businesses, except if you have a worker or employee who's not going to be in contact with any members of the public. With the exception being, and again, this is the second place this applies, is if you're working at a business when you're preparing, serving, or packaging food or beverages for public consumption. The third business restriction is while working at a business in a location where you will intend to be in contact with the public, unless there is a physical barrier that would stop the spread. So your common plastic barriers that you've seen and that have popped up around in the retail environments. The other 2, one is being inside or upon borough-owned or controlled publicly accessible property, being the buildings, parks, playgrounds, fields, or open spaces, including Borough Hall and 80 Windsor Avenue. Those are locations that are controlled or owned by the borough, and in fact, the borough could close those if they wanted to, and I understand that council does not want to close that. They want the public to be able to utilize those spaces safely. But that is borough-owned or controlled property. Then the second is upon any public street or sidewalk located within the 5A downtown district or 5B Montgomery Avenue district on the zoning map. It's my understanding, and as the ordinance sets forward, it's those 2 areas because those are the more densely populated areas and more likely to come into contact with other people. I'm happy to go into further details. There is a provision in this ordinance that does continue the emergency declaration, which council has a right to do pursuant to section 7501D. of the disaster emergency. But again, we're still under the Commonwealth as well. With that, I will turn it over to council to see if council has any questions or comments, and then we'll turn it over to the public for any questions or comments at that time.
Okay. Any council members? 3, 2, 1. Okay, John.
One has her hand up.
Oh,
Yeah.
there you go. Sorry, I can't see everybody.
So I do have a question. This is where we would discuss, is this the time in the meeting when we discuss pros and cons of the ordinance? Are we going to have time to do
Yes.
that?
So right now we're in a public hearing, and council is needing to discuss and make a decision as to whether or not council would like to approve this ordinance, table this ordinance, or vote this ordinance down. And it's up to council to ultimately make that decision after hearing from the public as well, who wanted to participate in this hearing.
So Mona, we could have this sort of active debate now, or we could allow members of the public to speak, and then when it comes up under 7E and it's a motion on the table, council could there will be additional opportunity for discussion.
Okay. I think I'd choose to share my comments now. Could I?
Okay, go right ahead.
First of all, I want to say in terms of the mask ordinance overall, I think it's one of the most important mandates for local governments to protect the public safety of our residents. And we're faced with a situation where there's not only a lack of leadership on this global pandemic from our president and his administration, but our president constantly undermines all the scientific safeguards we could take, such as masks, testing, distancing, and in addition is attacking and censoring scientists who are doing their best to help our country navigate the pandemic. So as a result, we in the US are among the countries with the highest per capita percentage rate of COVID cases and deaths. So, amidst this void of leadership from our president, we local governments are left with only a few options. And we don't have the same level of testing and contact tracing that we could potentially to manage the pandemic. We're left with two very basic but effective scientific measures: masks and physical distancing. I want to say that I commend our mayor, Andrea Deutsch, on her leadership during this emergency. She has made hard choices every step of the way this year, and I'm so thankful she's our mayor at a time like this. Thank you, Mayor Deutsch. The CDC, State Department of Health, County Department of Health all support the use of masks and distancing in public spaces outdoors. And scientific experts are telling us the numbers are growing again in our country. And while the numbers are not as high in Pennsylvania, perhaps as other parts of the country right now, schools are reopening and we're entering cold and flu season. And we know from what scientists are telling us that numbers will go up and we need to be ready. So this mask ordinance, I believe, is the most effective way that our local government can safeguard the public health of our residents. Listen, I'm not only a public servant in government, I'm a public servant in my career. I'm a public school teacher. And I'm proud to be a teacher, and I take very seriously the trust that taxpayers and parents give us to educate and care for their children. And as public servants, it's our job to care for all citizens and to ensure accessibility for those who need assistance. And as a councilwoman, it's my job to also ensure accessibility for all of our residents in our public spaces. No person who is immunocompromised should have to be blocked from access to our business district or our parks because other people are refusing to wear masks while congregating within 6 feet of each other. No child should be blocked from using our playground due to health conditions that they or their guardians have. So this ordinance supports and enforces the governor's mandate, and it follows the recommendations of science and medical experts. I do want to say one thing about the amendment, which I think we need to discuss as a council, which is that in my first couple of readings of the ordinance, I believe I read it wrong. The definition of contact was being within 6 feet. And a resident brought up at our last Public Health and Safety Committee meeting the question, if I'm sitting on a bench by myself in the middle of the park and no one else is around, do I have to wear a mask? And I answered no, because the definition was contact within 6 feet. But I did then again go back and reread the ordinance very carefully another time. And I think that I misunderstood the ordinance. I think that the ordinance means that everyone in the parks need to wear a mask. But it creates an exception if you're doing physical training and you can maintain 6 feet. So it creates this strange situation where someone sitting alone on a bench with no one else around them would need a mask, but people engaging in physical fitness could take off their masks if they can maintain 6 feet. So I propose, and I don't know the correct way to do this, so I think this is what we should discuss tonight, because I'm guessing that other people may have misinterpreted that as well. I think that we should add an exception to the ordinance, whether we do it, whether we do that later on or we figure out how to do that at some point tonight. I think we need to add an exception to the ordinance for the park portion, saying that anyone who can maintain at least 6 feet from all people not in their household is exempt from wearing a mask as long as they have one on their person and can put it on when needed. So those are my thoughts. That's the only thing that I think, in everything else about the ordinance I like, but I think that was just one part that I misinterpreted, and I'm wondering if other people did too. Thank you.
Other council members?
I have a statement as well, Aaron.
Go ahead.
All right. I support this ordinance. COVID-19 cases nationwide have been spiking, and it looks like in a few days, the number of daily new infections in the US will reach a new peak. Statewide, cases are also rising, and just yesterday, New York State threatened to quarantine all Pennsylvanians trying to enter. Epidemiologists warn that colder weather will continue to drive more cases as people spend less time outdoors, which is relatively safer, and move indoors. We are not yet near the point of having a vaccine. The situation will continue to get worse. Scientific research has consistently established that mask wearing is a significant protective measure that helps not only the person wearing the mask, but the community around them. I wear a mask sewn by one of my neighbors every time I leave my house. Narberth residents have done a good job so far protecting themselves and their neighbors and loved ones from the epidemic. However, walking around downtown or along the park, I can't help but notice numerous people walking around without masks. It's a public health danger. Narberth's downtown is the heart of the community, but our merchants are facing a big financial challenge responding to the pandemic. I know people who are unwilling to visit our downtown area due to the chance of exposure, which results in even more of a financial hit. We've already taken some steps as a council to create safe outdoor dining options, but we need to do what else we can to keep the downtown area safe. National, state, and county health officials have all called for the wearing of masks. Pennsylvania's governor has issued an order. Narberth's mayor has made appeals to the community and has personally approached groups that aren't wearing masks and has been rudely rebuffed. Despite these calls from medical experts that have been echoed by all levels of our government, well, at least in the state, moral suasion has failed to persuade people to consistently wear masks. We need to take action. Narberth's police have been reluctant to approach maskless individuals despite the governor's orders on the matter because they do not see a way to enforce those orders. This mask ordinance provides such a framework. Our police officers will be asked first to offer a warning along with a mask, and then we'll have the power to enforce the regulation with a fine. Coronavirus kills, and even those whom it spares can end up in the hospital or with long-term damage to the lungs or the circulatory system, or spread the illness to their loved ones. If this ordinance prevents even a few cases of COVID, it will have been well worth it.
Thank you. Any other council members?
Will we have an opportunity to speak after we hear from the public?
Yes, I'm sure we'll have a discussion, especially Mona, as it might relate to the details of an amendment or change after we hear the public and when it comes up again under 7E.
I'll have a comment then.
Okay. Anyone else?
I'll share my comment now.
Great.
If that's okay. All right. I just want to acknowledge that I realize any consideration of a measure like this, a public health measure, requires us to sort of weigh the burdens on the public against the protection offered. And, where you have a decision like that, people might weigh those risks and benefits differently and reach different conclusions. And I think that's okay. But based on everything I've heard in my research, there is a risk of catching coronavirus and subsequently COVID by walking near someone outdoors. For this reason, epidemiologists and health experts are in broad agreement that masks should be worn outdoors in places where a distance of 6 feet cannot be maintained. In addition, our assessment of this risk is kind of a moving target. It's based on our current understanding of the properties of the virus, but we're learning things on a weekly basis. Relatively recently, a mutation that predominates in Houston was classified as being more contagious. It's a strain that concentrates more in the upper respiratory tract and therefore spreads faster. I'd be surprised if this or other strains that are more capable of infecting don't find their way to our part of the country at some point. Strains that require less immediate or extended physical proximity for transmission. Generally, the kinds of interactions and contacts that we have in our community downtown or in the parks, and we're a small, friendly community, they tend to be prolonged conversations with neighbors and acquaintances. Friends sit near one another in the bleachers or in the park, particularly teens, groups of teens. Many of our sidewalks are too narrow for us to pass one another and maintain 6 feet of distance. The tunnel under the train tracks is particularly narrow and contained. And people sneeze and people cough unexpectedly on one another, as well as on objects like door handles and stair railings that many people touch. We have 3 pubs downtown, and when folks gather and have some drinks on a weekend, it's easy to forget about social distancing. It's very hard for us to maintain vigilance with respect to distancing, and that's where masks come in. I know none of us would ever intentionally infect anyone in our community, but often there's a period of at least a few days when people are contagious and they don't know it. They don't know they're positive for coronavirus. Some individuals, particularly young children, are known to remain asymptomatic, and they have the capacity to spread the virus widely. Our downtown is shared by young, healthy individuals, but also by people who are in high medical risk groups like elderly, folks who are immunocompromised. And I believe these people have a right to feel and to be protected to the extent that we can protect them in our core community spaces. And let's not forget that anyone who does become infected then takes the virus back with them to their homes and workplaces. The CDC has stated that the main protection that individuals gain from masking occurs when others in their communities also wear face coverings. A University of Chicago infectious disease expert went so far as to say that unless a person is hiking where, quote, it's just you and nature, you should have a mask on. And I actually do know individuals in Narberth who have encouraged council to pass such an ordinance where every time you leave your house, you need to be wearing a mask everywhere. I feel like that's going a little too far in terms of a mandate. I'm more comfortable with the balance that this ordinance strikes between individual responsibility on the one hand and collective responsibility on the other, where we require face coverings in just those areas where we tend to gather in large numbers and in close proximity, with the appropriate exceptions noted in the ordinance and by our solicitor. I was informed this summer with respect to the governor's face covering rule that has no enforcement mechanism, that our police would not be able to enforce that rule because the borough lacked a specific ordinance. And that's really the impetus for taking the initiative to create this mechanism, okay? The ordinance is as narrowly tailored, I think, as possible. We could talk about Muna's suggestion, though, later. And we modified the proposed ordinance to lower the fine, to simplify enforcement for our law enforcement officers, to ensure that initially our officers, it would just involve a simple warning coupled with the offer of a mask. Yeah, I think it can be very hard to keep the reality of something like COVID front and center when it goes on. And we have so little experience with these sort of low level and yet severe risks that present themselves over an extended time frame. But there's a statistic that really shocked me, and maybe it will shock you too. I learned that COVID-19 is responsible for more police line of duty deaths than any other cause in 2020. In fact, I think than all the other causes put together. Complications that resulted from contracting coronavirus on the job have killed more police officers than anything else in 2020. And so I understand that it's a burden to enforce this law, but it protects those who are enforcing it as well as those of us in the community. That when I learned that, it really impacted the way I thought about this. The greatest factor that is within our control for being able to keep our businesses open, keep our schools open, is to keep our rate of community spread low, okay? Because once the rate of community spread begins to climb, inevitably and mathematically, it's going to increase in an exponential type of fashion. Colder weather is coming. This is the time of year when colds and coronaviruses tend to thrive the best. Facts are changing rapidly, and community spread can spike much faster than we can pass protective legislation. That's why I'm glad we're doing this now and being proactive, okay? Because it can take a couple months to move forward an ordinance. I think this is the wise thing to do. We're seeing spikes emerge around us now, as Fred noted. I have confidence that a safe and effective vaccine will be available in the near future, next year, I believe, sometime, I hope. And so this limited face covering requirement is going to be a temporary inconvenience, right? It's to manage an emergent situation, not a permanent intrusion. On the balance, looking at the pros and the cons and the risks, the benefits and the burdens, I will be voting yes in this ordinance. I do support it. I think that it will bring a net benefit to our community, keep us all safer.
Thank you, Michelle. Any other council members?
I don't want to reiterate what my colleagues have said, who have so thoughtfully stated, and just wanted to add 3 quick points. The first is just today, the CDC updated new science. I mean, we have only known about COVID for 10 months. And I will read from the article posted on the website about a case in Vermont where a correctional officer, and quote, never spent 15 consecutive minutes within 6 feet of an incarcerated person with COVID-19. Rather, there were numerous brief, approximately 1-minute encounters that cumulatively exceeded 15 minutes over an 8-hour shift. This is very new, right? Because the science has said until this time you needed to be exposed at 15 minutes, and this science is suggesting that that may not be accurate. This just underscores what you all said, in that we are learning new information every day. Aside from the ordinance having the goal of preventing infection, which is obviously the primary target, I think there are some secondary and tertiary needs that this speaks to. And the first is this really eliminates the burden of business owners and our beloved shop owners that have to have these interactions with people that refuse to wear masks. I mean, ask some of our local businesses. They've been spit on, they've had bottles thrown at them, they've been yelled at, they've been threatened that they will not shop there if you're making me put the mask on the nose. I feel like this is almost what I school my kids to say. You know, if you're in a situation that you're uncomfortable with, you blame mom and dad. I feel as if this ordinance supports our shop owners by saying it's the law in Narberth. And in a downtown that is so struggling and so vulnerable with this pandemic, we're supporting them as well. The second is, quite honestly, it's heartbreaking to hear when seniors are saying, I no longer wander down to the park because there are hordes of teenagers and kids and families without a mask on. And while we are not measuring the long-term health implications of senior citizens, we know that they need to, like the rest of us, these are the exact populations that need to be out in the park, and that perception of it not being safe prevents those senior citizens in our community from using our public space. And we committed in our comprehensive plan to allow people to age in place. And I think this is a small action, a minor inconvenience, to assure that folks can safely do that.
Thank you. Any other council members? All right. John, I guess we can open this up to the public. I'll let you sort of set the ground rules. We're going to do it 3 minutes for each participant.
As President Muterick mentioned, we will now turn this over to the public for public comment on this particular topic. So this is a hearing on this ordinance. So this isn't the time for comment on other non-related matters. The time limits will be 3. If you hear your comment already said, again, you may just want to echo someone else's comment, but feel free to make known what other comments you'd like to have. There won't be comment again from the public on this prior to the vote on this. Again, so what will happen is we'll have this hearing. We're having this hearing. We'll adjourn the hearing. We'll adjourn back into the public meeting for the vote later. So if you'd like to comment, please comment during this hearing. And I will defer to either Aaron or to the manager, Mr. Metrick.
Right. So I can Yeah, I can see everyone in the meeting here. So I will start with Georgette DuBois. Georgette, do you have a comment on this matter?
Yes, just this afternoon, I put together an email that I sent to all the council members. And first of all, I'm just so pleased that you've been working on this and that it sounds like this ordinance will pass. I think it's critically important. And my comments today were specifically about making sure that anything that goes out to the public is explicit about the fact that a mask has to cover your nose as well as your mouth. It seems that some people either really don't understand that, and they have a mask over their mouth and they think they're doing something, and in fact they're not. So you all have the comments, the email that I sent, and I would ask that for the businesses, given that they'll be required to have signage about what's required under the ordinance, that every sign that's posted anywhere, again, is explicit about having proper wearing of a mask means covering your mouth and your nose. And I would ask that the police understand that, are familiar with the fact that the ordinance states that under the definition, so that they can approach anybody, not just people who are not wearing a mask, but anybody who's wearing a mask that leaves their nose uncovered. I think the comments everyone made, the council folks made, have been excellent and expressed so well. And this is one thing we can do. It is going to get worse, and it's getting worse. It will continue to get worse. We don't know how bad it'll get, but if there's anything we can be doing to, I think someone had said, save even one person, I think maybe it was Fred, one person from getting COVID, then it's absolutely worth it. So thank you all, and I look forward to the passage and the enforcement of this ordinance.
Thank you.
One of the things I should again highlight again, as Mr. DuBois said, is that the definition of face covering does specifically refer, as she mentioned, to covering both the nose and the mouth to impede the spread of any sort of saliva or droplets. And additionally, for the public that would like to participate, if you could give your name prior to speaking and your address prior to making your statement as well. Thank you.
111 Price Avenue, Georgette DuBois.
CAROLMARIE Scanlon.
Hello. So I agree with the mask mandate in the crowded downtown area because social distancing cannot be maintained. But the governor's stance is that a mask is to be worn when you cannot maintain social distancing. And there are a lot of times that we are at the park and you can maintain social distancing. And I think that the ordinance needs to have added, as Mona said, when you cannot maintain social distancing. And I think that's very important for the parks. I think we need to be out in the open space. We need to be breathing so we can actually breathe, get these kids out there. They have a mask with them, but if they're on the swing, they're the only one on the swing, let them swing without a mask. These kids need some normalcy in their life. They need to feel at least as if they're not prisoners in their house and in their town wearing a mask. It's hard enough homeschooling these kids when they need to get out and scream and yell and just burn off steam. Let them go when they can social distance, maintain their 6 feet, alone at the park or someone else at the other end of the park. Let them have the freedom not to wear a mask when they can maintain social distancing. Of course, this afternoon up at Sabine Park, it was packed. We all had masks on. That's obvious. But when there's nobody there, we don't need to wear a mask. And that was my comment.
Thank you very much. Dennis Callan, if you could state your name and address, and then you'll have 3 minutes.
Dennis Callan, 27 Narbrook Park. No comment. I support the ordinance.
All right, thank you. Moving to the individual labeled as Steve.
Yeah, thanks, Aaron. Steve DeRico,
Hi,
402
Steve.
North Essex Avenue. So I would like to see the ordinance amended to account for what Carol mentioned in terms of being at the park. If you cannot social distance within 6 feet, wearing a mask makes sense. However, many times the park provides enough space where you can social distance. My other concern is around the enforcement of this ordinance. I do not think it will be able to be enforced. I think our police department should be enforcing real risks on a more consistent basis, like calming traffic and enforcing cars stopping at stop signs, which frankly could injure or kill residents probably a lot more easily than COVID could. So appreciate the time. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And next, Jerry Day. Second, Jerry Day. All right, no comment from Jerry. Oh, here we go. Go ahead, Jerry. You're unmuted. Sounds like technical difficulties, maybe. Jerry, I'm going to put you back on mute, and we will circle back around in a few moments. Looks like Gary Senker. Gary, do you have any comment? All right. Hearing none. Missy. Missy, it looks like we lost Missy. David Federman. David, any comment?
President Mutrick, I'm not seeing anyone's mics being unmuted on my side.
They have the opportunity to unmute if they desire when I call their name. I don't have them on lock. Sure, Karen Stern.
Hi. I sent an email. I'll just summarize it, and I want to add to it.
Could just give us your address too?
Oh, sorry, Karen Stern, Chestnut Avenue. I support this ordinance. I have largely stopped going to the north side of town because I'm tired of dodging people who are standing in the middle of the sidewalk with no mask. I only go there if I have an appointment or I have to go to the post office. I don't feel safe with so many unmasked people standing around, and I basically have to walk into the street most of the time to avoid them because the sidewalks are so narrow. Also, I would like to add that the police need to follow this ordinance. I was recently involved in an unrelated call where an officer came out. He was not wearing his mask. Then he put it to under his nose and, was talking to me and other people kind of up close, and that is not safe. So I want to know how the police will also, how will you enforce the police following this ordinance as well, and other borough officials.
Okay, I know that Chief Gallagher would like to probably follow up on that, but given that we're in a hearing, it's sort of a one-way communication medium. So we'll make a note, Karen, and we'll get back to you.
Pass it along. Okay.
We will. He's here listening.
I know.
Thank you. David Wicks. I'm sorry, you're on mute. You have to unmute yourself. No, he's a pass. Thank you, David. Alexi, you'll have to unmute yourself also. No, still on mute. Unfortunately, we don't have the power to unmute you.
You can actually in participants.
There. Okay, go ahead, Alexi.
Okay.
Oh, hey. Yeah, I'm Alexi Pettit. I'm at 323 Haverford Avenue in, Narberth Apartment 6. I agree with pretty much all the other people. I see a lot of parents out with their babies, and none of them are wearing face masks. It's kind of weird. They got babies with them. Why aren't they wearing masks? But yeah, I'm done. That's it.
Okay. Thank you. David Federman, or actually anyone at this
Yeah.
point who, yes?
I can speak.
Go ahead,
Aaron?
David.
Yeah, I
David, state your name and address for the record.
David Federman in Penn Valley. My
Yes.
wife works in Narberth. I take the train every day from Narberth.
Yes.
I wear my mask all the time, except when I'm walking around by myself and no one's around at 7 o'clock in the morning. The comments I make is just that I believe the ordinance should include this social distancing component everywhere. That's what the governor's, Governor Wolf's guidelines include. The City of Philadelphia's proclamation includes. The CDC's recommendations include, and it gives people the flexibility to not wear a mask when nobody's around. You're just walking. I've heard the comments. I'm in favor of the mask. Everybody knows what it does. But in particular, and outside, and I think one of the issues in terms of along the main drag where everybody eats outside, you have people eating and they're allowed to take their masks off, but people walking by them have to wear their mask. It just seems incongruous, and for if you can social distance, that should be part of it. I also don't believe the police should be preoccupied with this. I think it should be a proclamation and a declaration of purpose and of intent and of high recommendation, and maybe give out masks. But I really think it's a misuse of the police, and especially with the parks. I agree with all the comments about the parks. I think it should be amended, at least to include a component of social distancing with all the other proclamations and mandates include, except for this one. So that's my comment. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, David. I believe I got everybody who wanted an opportunity to speak, but I'll just take a moment. If you did not have an opportunity to speak already and you would like to make a comment in this public hearing, unmute yourself, and hopefully not too many people at once, and I will make time for you.
This is Jerry Day.
There we go. Thank you, Jerry. Go ahead.
It's Jerry and Chris Day. We're here together.
Hey, and what's your address?
215 Wayne Ave.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. We both support the mask wearing, and we're in support of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Solicitor Walco, I believe that everyone who has desired to make public comment has had a chance to do so.
Has there any comments been submitted through the Civic Association, or any other comments been made known? I will mark as Board Exhibit 5 all of the emails that I have been copied on, and we will incorporate that with any other letters or emails that Council has received from the public regarding this as well. So we'll make those officially part of this hearing as Board Exhibit 5.
Great.
Hey, Aaron.
Yes, Rob.
May I just add? I did a quick listing of the emails that I received.
Mm-hmm.
So could I just add to the record?
Please do,
John. So the emails I received with concerns about the ordinance or against the ordinance from folks that we haven't heard from now during this meeting include Xavier Hayden, 108 Dudley, Kirsten Polombaro, 211 Price, David Burdo, 104 Chestnut, Mike Worth, 210 Sabine, and Charles Hutton on Woodside. And then we received a number of emails in support of the ordinance from Robert Fisher, 210 North Essex, Jim Spear on Grayling, Jennifer Schwartz, 103 Conway, and Terry Baxter, 323 Windsor. I just wanted to add that to the record.
Okay.
I'm not sure if you mentioned this, but there was also a email against from Steve DeRico that was copied on as well.
Yeah.
Steve did have an opportunity to speak this evening. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I guess, John, you can close and bring us back.
Yeah, at this time, there's no further public comment or questions from council. We will adjourn this public hearing, and we will adjourn back into the public meeting where this ordinance is now in a position to be voted upon by council.
Thank you. So now we'll move to agenda item 6, which actually is public comment. This would be an opportunity to make any public comment you would like. on any matter other than the mask ordinance. If anybody would like to do so, I guess I'm not going to go through everybody's name, but if I see you unmuted, I will call on you in order. So, CAROLMARIE.
Hello again. So my question is about 201 Sabine Avenue, and I have several comments I'd like, and I'd hope that we could have some answers to them. So recently, Muna had said that she had made up a questionnaire to circulate within the town to find out what the town wants to have as regards to 201 Sabine. And I am wondering, is that still on the table? Is that something that you are planning on doing? Any comment?
I don't know that I have a comment at this time. We're working on the presentation for next week. Sean, maybe.
Sorry. Is there a petition or the questionnaire from Muna being circulated in town to find out what residents would?
I don't think that we ever did a written survey, but I don't think Beth proceeded with that.
Our intention is to follow up with the meeting on the 27th with everyone we've made contact with a survey, CAROLMARIE, but that's not, it's not finished yet or ready to go.
I'm sorry, so a survey is going to be set out before the meeting on the 27th?
No, after.
No, it would be after. And it is not, I'm not guaranteeing you that a survey will go out, but that seems to be where we're trending right now.
All right, because that would be very helpful because, we're looking at the format for the 27th meeting is in a Zoom meeting, but we've got people that were having trouble unmuting or figuring out the format. So I really, I wonder, is there another way that we can have a meeting besides in a Zoom meeting that people can actually work the format or work the whatever it is, the internet type thing. And then my next comment is at the neighbors meeting, we were under the impression that we would be talking to Elizabeth Beckett, but instead we were in breakout groups. And then our comments were summarized and given to Elizabeth Beckett in a larger group. That I think she needs to hear exactly from us what we individually want to say rather than in just, oh, this is what this group said. Because when you're doing that, when you're just summarizing us, you don't really hear what we say. You don't really hear the passion, the conviction, the ideas that we have. It's like, oh yeah, well, Group A said this. Oh yeah, well, Group A said that. And then also, how many meetings will there be before the RFP?
So I don't have an answer for the second question because I just don't actually know. I don't think there's any decision been made, but I would encourage you to email the borough office, and those comments, any comments from anyone would be sent directly to Beth, and I'm sure she would consider them when she's preparing her report.
All right. Now, are you planning on flyering the town to get the word out about this meeting so people that aren't on social media or that people that aren't looking at the polls or looking at the signpost things? How are you planning on getting the word out?
We're using the same methods of advertising that we do for all the things, which is a variety of electronic means. We use the signboards, and we rely on our friends and neighbors as well to tell people about things that are important to them. So,
all right, and then my final would be again talking about a land trust or an open space easement on all the properties that are open on 80 Windsor as well as 201 Sabine Park to guarantee that we will have open space. Yes, there was a proclamation made, but a proclamation is a piece of paper, whereas a land trust is a permanent.
Okay, so noted. Thank you. Any other public comments? Seeing no one else coming off mute, I will close public comment and we will move to 7A. Can I get a motion from Finance and Administration to approve the minutes, please?
Thank you. I move that Borough Council approve the minutes of the September 16th, 2020 business meeting of Borough Council.
Second. Seconded by Fred. Any discussion of the minutes? All in favor? Aye. Minutes are approved. 7B, a motion for the schedule of bills.
I move that Borough Council approve the schedule of bills for the general highway aid, sewer, and solid waste funds, and authorize the borough manager to pay all bills.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Fred, thank you. Any discussion on this schedule? Hearing none. All in favor? Aye. Unanimous approval. 7C,
I move that Borough Council approve a time extension for the review of the tentative sketch plan for the project located at 3 Elmwood Avenue. The extension of time is to and including November 30th, 2020 per the attachment.
is there a second? Michelle, thank you. Is there any, it seems like we're just offering an extension here. Do any council members would like more detail from Mr. Metric or Mr. Walko on this? Is there any other discussion?
The only thing I would note, President Muterick, is that there was a revised plan that was formally submitted regarding this. So I'm not sure if that has been circulated yet, either in the public or not. But the plan that you had seen months ago isn't the active plan.
Okay.
Which is responsive to the comments for the Planning Commission,
right?
Or attempting to be. So, no surprises.
Okay. All in favor of approving the extension? Aye. Motion passes unanimously. 7D.
I move that Borough Council approve a lease extension amendment for a tenant at 201 Seavine Avenue.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, seconded by Bob. Is there any discussion? And before I say that, I preface that given that this is a lease negotiation, if there is significant discussion about the terms or criteria within the lease, we would want to do that in executive session. Any comments or thoughts? Discussion? Hearing none. All in favor? Aye. Okay. The lease extension is approved. 7E, a mask ordinance.
I move
Thank you, Rob.
that Borough Council adopt Ordinance 1027, an ordinance of Narberth Borough creating a new chapter, temporary face covering, providing for the findings and declarations of Borough Council, providing for definitions requiring face coverings to be worn in certain settings and exceptions thereto, requiring the posting of requirements, providing an expiration date, providing for enforcement violations and penalties, and extending the borough's emergency declaration per the attachment.
Is there a second? Michelle has seconded. Okay, further discussion. Mona.
So could we discuss in front of council what the possibilities would be for changing it to mean that in the parks, you do not need to wear a mask as long as you have one on your person and can maintain 6 feet of distance from anyone not in your household? So I know that because we've already advertised this, we cannot amend this particular ordinance. So could we ask Solicitor Walko to explain to us what the options would be if people are interested in making that change?
Of course, go ahead.
Can we discuss those options before Mr. Walko comments on that? Just because I feel pretty strongly against that amendment, so I'd like to kind of have that conversation before we talk about logistics. So, 2 reasons. One is we just read, I just read the CDC report that's saying aerosols lingers, and it's not. In fact, there is a case where it wasn't 15 minutes of exposure. So I'll return to the science is evolving every day. And then the other is just logistical. I mean, imagine, so we're now going to ask our law enforcement officers to run around with a yardstick to say, like, this is 6 feet, no, you're 5 feet, no, you're 7 feet. I trust that our officers are professional and that they use discretion. I really have a hard time envisioning someone sitting on a park bench and one of our officers pulling over and enforcing a mandate. These folks are professional. They're trained in de-escalation. They're going to apply the law and use their fireworks and use their discretion in implementing this law. And that I think rather than worrying about, no, you're 5 feet, no, you're 7 feet, the blanket mask ordinance, I'm sorry, speaking of police, there's people in the middle of Iona setting off fireworks. The blanket ordinance of you need to be wearing a mask in the park alleviates this conversation of, wait, it's in my pocket, and then as soon as someone goes away, they're returning. It just feels much easier to me.
Any other council members?
Yeah, I just want to echo that. I would be willing to accept either solution. I think they're both workable. I'm not dogmatic about it, but I know that when we talked about this before, we did talk about it specifically in those terms, trying to make this as straightforward, simple to understand and enforce as possible. And so in that line, I typically do think that our officers have our professionals who can enforce this with reasonable discretion. I mean, I think we all know that when it comes to enforcing any number of public safety laws, police tend to use some level of discretion and to understand that the goal is to keep the public safe. So I'm comfortable leaving it where it is. I could be persuaded otherwise, but I tend to see it the way that you do, Cindy, as well, that we're better off with a clearly delineated and straightforward ordinance rather than complicating it and asking our officers. I've said what I need to say.
Well, Mayor, go ahead if you unmute yourself.
So I absolutely see both sides, and I understand that the officers can use discretion, but I do see also the interest if you're sitting all by yourself with no one anywhere near you. Should you be subject to this thing? Would it be possible to make it if you're 20 feet away? So there's no, like, a larger amount of space where there's no question that you're going to come into contact. So that way that takes a lot of the discretionary issues out of it.
Any other council members? Rob?
I just want to, remind us, I do hear both sides, but the first offense comes with a warning, right? And our police would offer a mask. So, I think in most cases, we're not going to see any sort of escalation. This is not 1918 when we had the Spanish flu and paddy wagons were rounding up people, hundreds of people. This, I think, is going to be a very manageable situation. And we've worked carefully to kind of scale the penalty so that it's $15, so that there's a warning. So I think it's reasonable as it is.
Bob, go ahead.
You're muted, Bob.
Bob, you're muted.
Okay.
Mary.
Hi. No, I just wanted to say very quickly that it initially had some misgivings about this particular requirement in the park area, because I felt that necessities, people need to shop and do business, and there's a necessity, and it certainly is. For all of the reasons that have been mentioned, there are good reasons to require people wear masks in the business district. I didn't feel the same way about the playground, but my mind has changed, and I've been persuaded actually by Cindy's perspective that in our comprehensive plan, we really, encourage. We want to make the parks available, accessible to everybody of all abilities and ages. This ordinance is relatively harmless. And so even if you're really against it and you feel like it's an impingement on your freedom or it's an unnecessary burden, it's really not a big ask, I don't think, to protect your neighbors from the possibility that you might be a carrier of the virus. Over 800 people had the virus in Lower Marion Township Narberth, I know, has very low numbers. We don't really have adequate contact tracing numbers to know how this virus is actually spread through community spread. So there's a lot of unknowns about this. It seems to me that it's a benign requirement and could potentially do some good. So now I'm just repeating what other people have said. But I do see, if this were, I just want to say to some of the people who objected, like say, who had objections to this ordinance, that I think we thought deeply about those concerns that they raised. And I think my sense is that we see this differently, say, than a helmet requirement, like that you wear a helmet when you ride a motorcycle, because in that instance, you're really only putting yourself at risk, where it's more akin to a seatbelt requirement, that when you're wearing a seatbelt, you're also protecting the society at large from damage. It's not just to protect you. So I'm going to vote in favor of this, and I actually wanted to support Mona's amendment, but I think I like this ordinance as it's written.
Aaron, can I make one more quick comment if everyone's gone?
I think Fred, do you have anything more to add?
I mean, the only thing I would say is it doesn't seem like the will is to change it, but I would want the sidewalks around the parks to be fully covered. I think that there's lots of people on those sidewalks, and people are constantly passing each other. So,
okay, Cindy.
Just a quick council reflection, because we got so many emails, and those that we responded to, it was really amazing to see people respectfully disagree, which we don't see nationally. So it was a great reminder in Narberth that we still can respectfully disagree. But my comment is more that this reminds me so much of when we made the decision to close the bridge to cars, and we used the data, we used the science, we used the expertise of the engineer, and we really wrestled. And that meeting is one of the most memorable ones, because we really wrestled with the fact of we're understanding the science and we can take that recommendation. But in Narberth, we're sitting around here as council members, and suppose there's a kid that doesn't follow the rule and gets hit by a car. Suppose a biker goes over that bridge. And if you remember, we ultimately really weighed, like, businesses are telling us this will hurt us. Commuters are saying this is going to add congestion and really make my commute a heck of a lot harder. And we opted for the fact of we should act conservatively and proactively, because at the end of the day, we all need to go home and feel comfortable that we did all that we could to protect our community members. And this mask ordinance, I think, has been really complex for all of us to think through those details. It reminds me of that really big issue that we voted on, gosh, a year or so ago. So that's all.
Thank you. Mona, go ahead.
Hi. So, I do want to say it first. I mean, I've really listened hard to the pros and cons on this, and at one point I was against it because of concerns about enforcement. But I believe our officers are professionals and can do this well. So I've thought a lot about the pros and cons, but I do see a difference between the way it should be enforced in the parks and the business district, because when you are in the business district and people are not masking, there is no way to avoid it without walking into the street, which is a danger, which is a hazard. When you are in the parks, there is so much room that there are ways to safely be in the parks without a mask, as long as you have one on your person. So to me, that's the big distinction between the business district and the parks. You don't have to walk into the street to endanger yourself or other people. I actually think that that if we amended it this way, it would make enforcement easier for our law enforcement officers, because they don't have to chase down everyone in the park. They could just look at where there are clusters of people who are clearly not in the same household together. And I do like Mayor Deutsch's suggestion. Maybe it's 10 feet, maybe it's 20 feet, but I do like that suggestion that, they shouldn't need to get out a yardstick. They always have discretion for how they're enforcing the laws. And I also think that signage will make this easier. I think we're going to need really clear signage in both the business districts and the park, and the signs could read different things if we amended it. And I honestly believe that good signage will get us 75% of the way there or more on the enforcement issue if people saw the signs. So I guess my question is, and I do think if you're in the park and there's no one else around you, yes, it's important to be able to breathe the fresh air. If you're a child who doesn't have a backyard and you live in an apartment building and you want to get outdoors and run and you're not going to be near anyone else, that's an opportunity that you have in the park that you don't have in a backyard, like children who have their own backyards. So, or other people or elderly people or whoever. So I guess my question is, how do we proceed from here, Aaron? Do we decide, like, we have to first figure out where we all stand, because that might affect how we all vote on the ordinance?
Yes. Well, if I'm reading the room, it sounds like it would be, of the ordinance as currently drafted, I'm hearing 6 people who are entirely comfortable with it, because I'll include myself there, and one who has a proposed amendment.
I just want to, I'm sorry, I don't mean to complicate. I do feel like I should have said something when I spoke up before. Again, I'm comfortable with it and I see some benefit in just making it simple, but I do have to say, Mona, there is a discordance in having an exception for playing of games and physical activities where people can maintain 6 feet from another, but not simply strolling on your own, where you're more than 6 feet from others. There's an odd discordance to carving out controlled, like physical training and yoga where you're 6 feet apart in the park, but not people who are just sitting on a bench by themselves. There's an oddness to that. And I'm not going to lie, it bothers me a little bit. And so I'm open to the idea of repairing that in some fashion. Andrea, I liked your suggestion. And I'm sorry, I'm complicating things and making the meeting last longer, but Mona, you make a good point. And that does kind of bother me.
So Mona, I hope you didn't hear my words incorrectly, or Michelle either. I'm not saying that everyone on council is not interested in making this amendment. What I'm hearing is that there are at least 6 council members who I'm pretty sure are willing to vote yay tonight to make this into law. And then there may be an opportunity to further refine the language or adjust the scope. But due to the nature of ordinances and how they are passed, we cannot make an amendment tonight. We would have to do it at a future date. And this is where I punt over to John Walco for our little law lesson on, the way we might handle that.
So President Mueller is correct. And as Muna mentioned as well, once an ordinance is advertised, you cannot go through substantive changes. And this certainly would be a substantive change on the fly. It would take a re-advertisement. So those who want to respond publicly to that substantive change have a right to do so. So I think really where that leaves council right now are a few options. One is you could leave this you could approve this ordinance and leave it and not touch it again. You could approve the ordinance and come back and make an amendment to the ordinance at a later time. You could table the ordinance and take no action on it. It would have to be re-advertised, as would if you were making substantive changes. Or you could vote to turn down the ordinance, and at that point there you could start a new ordinance process again with a substantively different ordinance. So those are your options. If you are choosing to make an amendment, just for timing wise, you could do that potentially at the November hearing, because unlike a zoning ordinance, you don't have the 30-day requirements for planning commission reviews. So you could theoretically approve this ordinance if that's council's desire, put together an amendment, and then advertise that amendment and have another hearing at the next meeting or a December meeting, whenever council so desires, if they desire, to provide additional language to amend it. So those are the options.
Mr. President?
Yes.
We discussed this ordinance pretty extensively in the Health and Public Safety Committee. I objected to the mask ordinance in the parks at that time, but was good with having it in the business district. Tonight, in hearing this discussion, in order to expedite this ordinance and this process, I withdrew my objection and understood that there were good arguments just to be made to pass this ordinance as is. I don't see the benefit to the borough to table this in order to make these special exceptions. If the council feels strongly that we pass or that we amend it further, I would say let's move it, and then let's take up this discussion once again in the Health and Public Safety Committee. Both Mona and I serve in that committee. I think we could probably suggest a modification that both of us could live with, and I would hope the other members of the council would also agree with, to make some exceptions for activities in the park. And I believe they should be. I simply let go of that objection because I'm trying to be expeditious and support the movement of this.
And I remind all of us that we hammered out this language quickly in a meeting because the situation on the ground in an emergency changed, and I always maintain that government governs worst when it governs fast. It governs best when it is deliberative and inclusive, and I think we've done a good job of trying to reach out to the community and inform people about this all as quickly and as many ways as we could because of the accelerated schedule of sort of the discussion of it. The adoption schedule is fixed by law, but so I also agree that we could go over this language again in a more deliberative way with a finer tooth comb and make some policy decisions one way or another that sort of more match the facts on the ground, and that also allow for an ordinance that is clear and easy to understand for everybody, the police as well as the citizens.
And
Fred,
perhaps in the interim we can suggest, suggest to the mayor and the police chief that they encourage the police to use discretion in the parks while this is, still being hammered.
And that's done all the time. That's pretty commonplace with laws that the police use discretion, or this happens all over the place, that law enforcement turn a blind eye to certain activities that are sort of sanctioned by a culture or a community.
Cindy?
I just want to add, every scenario is assuming that police are not using their discretion. And I have faith that our officers and our chief are going to do that. So these scenarios of people sitting by themselves in a park or kids playing on their park, I don't see our police acting in ill will. I'd also suggest that we don't amend something that we don't know how it works yet. Let's gather some time and get feedback from our chief, from the officers or the enforcement before we try to amend something that we don't know that is broken quite yet. So I'd suggest before public health and safety take this up is that we really give the police some time to understand what this looks like on the ground.
Well, if we do pass this ordinance tonight, the chief is a part of the Health and Public Safety Committee, so I'm sure he will be a part of that discussion.
Good point. So after we pass it, he's part of that conversation in public health. Sure.
Any further discussion? Yes, Mona.
I understand you can pass a law and say, well, let's not enforce it strictly in some points. I'm not really comfortable with that because I feel that I believe in the rule of law. And I think you get down a slippery slope when things are enforced arbitrarily. So I'm not really comfortable with saying, let's vote for this and just, allow our law enforcement to just ignore people who are sitting by themselves. I mean, I just think you get down a slippery slope when the law is unclear and enforced in an arbitrary manner.
Aaron, I have a motion. Aaron, I have a motion. If I can make a motion to table this.
Well, we have a motion on the floor. Is it an amendment or?
Well, no, I guess it's a suggestion that we table this and return to health and public safety for the reason Mona stated. And unless there's a willingness to.
Well, you can definitely make a move to table and see if there's a second.
I move to table.
Okay. Is there a second? Mona seconds. All right. Now the discussion and the motion on the floor is whether to table the mask ordinance.
Wait, to table the mask ordinance?
I would say, as the first participant,
you're moving to. I thought you were moving.
So since I made the motion,
that's what we are.
Since I made a motion, I'll make the first comment. If if the council votes to table the ordinance, I'll vote for it. If the council votes against tabling the ordinance, I intend to vote for this ordinance.
Okay. Well, I'm not going to vote to table the ordinance because I came here hoping we would vote on the ordinance, but I wouldn't mind having a slight bit of more discussion so that when public health and safety goes off and looks to refine this ordinance after we pass it, which I believe we will, because I do not believe we will vote to table it. I won't. We have had a little bit more time to sort of make sure that we're clear about what it is that we are and aren't comfortable with. And then public health and safety will take those concerns under advisement. We'll consult with the chief and get back to us with whether there's any refinement that would improve the ordinance. So I will not be voting to table.
Rob?
Public health and safety meets in 2 weeks. So, with the timing of everything, that would be a significant delay. So I guess my preference would be to move ahead with a vote on the ordinance as is, and then public safety could consider the amendment language on November 4th.
I'd also like to point out, Fred, you did a great job at offering statistics. I believe Pennsylvania, as of yesterday, was a 4.3 positivity rate. The WHO dictates 5 is red flags. This is also the first week where kids are back into school, and 2 weeks is a really long time in a pandemic.
Any other comments on the motion to table? All in favor of tabling the face mask ordinance, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. To Mona, 1. Opposed, say nay.
Nay.
Nay. That is 6 nays. So the motion to table has failed, which means we are back to the face mask ordinance, which is the motion on the table. Is there any further discussion of this ordinance?
I'm just now in a very strange position of thinking I'm going to vote against this when I was in favor of it. And I thought that would be a reasonable, I thought that allowing people who are not around anyone else in the park to not wear a mask if they have a mask on their person, I thought that was a reasonable thing to think about. But I don't get the sense that would actually, I mean, if I thought that there was a majority of council members who would be willing to make that change to it later on, I might still vote for it, but I'm not necessarily getting that sense.
I'm fully in favor of making that change. I do not like the fact that we're subjecting people to a mask ordinance in the park. I'm not in favor of that. However, I'm voting for it because I think that the balance of the bill is a plus. It's what we need to do given the statistics, given the reality of this virus. I'm as a member of the Health and Public Safety Committee, I'm more than willing to take up and look at it again and modify it a second time.
Rob?
Mona, I am definitely willing to look at an amendment. And in our earlier meetings with public health, I was opposed to extending this ordinance like Bob to the parks. So I think the refinement that you're suggesting is something I'd like to take up in committee, but I don't want to delay the ordinance in full.
Okay, Aaron, I'm sorry. I had been trying to say something when we get the motion to table. I just want to say this, Mona, because it directly responds to your concern about police discretion and enforcement. And I'm always with you on this idea that if you're going to have a law in the books, you should enforce it, generally speaking. Don't be like, well, it's there, but we don't really do that. I just want to sort of read this subsection P, okay? Controlled, this is the carve out for the park, okay? Controlled non-contact practice and playing of games or other physical activities such as yoga or certain athletic conditioning drills, with a limit of 25 participants, including coaches and spectators, if all persons can maintain a distance of 6 feet from one another. Okay, I would suggest that the spirit of that carve out is clearly intended to say we're not enforcing this in the parks when people are distanced, but it's maybe not worded as well as it could be. And I would really like to entertain an amendment to word it to more accurately reflect what I am pretty convinced is the spirit of the ordinance. And because I think the spirit of the ordinance is really ascertainable from that language, I'm not uncomfortable with our police recognizing that and not going up and pressuring someone to put a mask on at 7 o'clock in the morning when they're sitting on a bench alone watching birds. I don't want that either. And I feel like I can fit that generally within here on a stopgap basis. That's,
I was going to share. I also, when we had our little straw poll when we were crafting this ordinance, voted against having the masks in the park. But you know, I think that we all have parts of any legislation that we are comfortable with and parts that we wouldn't like. But we recognize the greater good here. And for myself personally, having this ordinance in effect on the books will materially have a greater good than not having it on the books, with regardless of this you know, particular discussion point. So that's why I would vote in favor, and I would also support further discussion. Any other comments? All in favor of the mask ordinance, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Are there any opposed? None opposed. Alexi, thank you for your vote. It does not necessarily count, but I appreciate the effort. All right, we'll move to 8A, Borough Manager's Report.
Thank you, Mr. President. I don't have a report finished in time for this meeting to submit. It'll be updated in the meeting package as soon as it's done. And if council has any questions about it, please send them my way. Thank you.
Mr. Slow.
Thank you, President Mutrick. The only thing I have to report to council is the upcoming comprehensive zoning ordinance amendment that's likely to come before you for advertisement at some time at a future public hearing. And I just wanted to make sure council was on the same page of this. The ordinance draft is essentially completed. We are still waiting on some exhibits. As far as timing goes for that ordinance, this does need 30 days between the advertisement and the hearing in order for it to be submitted to the planning commissions for review. Due to the scheduling of the hearings in November to December, you don't have 30 days between the November meeting and the December meeting. So if this is an ordinance that council would like to see in 2020, it seems that council would need to take up that ordinance at its workshop meeting on November 4th, 2020 for a hearing at the December business meeting. Again, that's up to council whether or not that's what council schedule is desired. The only thing, again, to keep in mind in that is that any land development plans that are submitted for sketch plan prior to this ordinance taking effect would be under the old ordinance and not subject to any of these new requirements. So I think that is one of the things that is motivating the Planning Commission to try to get these ordinances revisions before you. Other than that, I don't have any other ordinances that I'm working on or any other significant matters for the borough. I would be happy to take up any amendments to this ordinance. I think it could be done pretty quickly and concisely, as it's just a small amendment to the one provision regarding the parks. So that's all I have to report.
Thank you very much. The monthly reports have been submitted. Are there any comments for the good of council? All right.
Hold on, I have one.
Yes.
I think other people may have watched the Civic Association, the meeting, the videotape of the meeting of the last Civic Association meeting. Aaron gave a very good sort of state of the borough. But I just wanted to particularly draw attention to the 3 slides that he presented near the end of the meeting about kind of how the council works. Actually, I'll send them around. I'll send a link to those 3 slides in particular. They kind of express a certain, I think, value or aspiration about how council can, sort of intends to work with each other, how we intend to work with one another, and I'd like us to consider including them in some way in our bylaws. So that's my comment.
Thank you. Andrea, were you going to say something?
I was just going to announce that the Business Association is having a pumpkin carving contest. Everybody's invited to participate and make it a festive event for everybody in town. Check out the Narberth Online for further details.
Thank you. Is there any new business? Agenda item 9. Any old business?
Got something?
I'll take. Yes, go ahead.
Sorry. So going back to the pop-up bike lane.
Oh yeah.
We've had some very productive meetings with DVRPC. They are very motivated to work with us, and they've come up with a plan for I think we've got about an 11-day. Right now, we're thinking about an 11-day pop-up trial over 2 blocks of Windsor Avenue. Sean, I don't know if you can share my screen, or if I can share my screen. Let me see. Can you enable screen sharing for me? You can put up the pretty picture they made for us.
Brad, while you're doing that, can I ask a question? I noticed there was some traffic counting going on Hadford Avenue. Was that part of what DVRPC was doing?
Not to my knowledge.
Sean or Matt, do you know what that was? Why they were counting cars?
Anytime you see a DVRPC traffic counter, that's due to their typical regional traffic counting. It's not project specific.
Oh, thank you.
All right. Sean's made me the host, so let me see if I can share my screen. Did this work? No. Why is this? All right, is everyone seeing this now? So this is a view of Windsor Avenue with some temporary modifications. This is the stretch between Forest and Grayling, which is the proposed spot for this pop-up bike lane. The main components are some green paint in those green spots, and some hay bales, which are the red markers. There are also some white lane striping. The proposal is to put a 2-way cycle track along the north side of Windsor Avenue for this 2-block stretch. There would be some temporary signs up to let people know what's going on. There'll be some green paint as well to mark some potential areas of conflict with cars. The idea would be to put it up on a Friday and keep it up for a week, and then take it down on a Monday. DVRPC has all kinds of great ideas about how to gather information, about talking to various stakeholders and various people who would be using the road. We would be putting up information along the kiosk near the post office and near the library. And using this information to plan something potentially bigger in the spring. They're looking to work with us and use this as a template for further working with other municipalities. So we're kind of the test case for this program, which is to set up pop-up bike lanes throughout the greater Philadelphia area. Sean, I don't know if you have anything else to add here, Sean or Matt?
No, other than we are coordinating communication, logistics, materials, lead time, and installation. So those things need to be planned out and come together in the same moment.
Yeah, we're hoping that we can get this down before it gets too cold and snowy. Hopefully, within the next month or so, everything moves smoothly.
I'd like to thank you and the committee, everyone who worked on this, because I know the council was dissatisfied with some prior attempts at moving forward, and I think we took a very entrepreneurial and cost-conscious approach, also a very sort of iterative approach to attempt this. And think it's the best plan I've seen for us to get some real data, for the community as a whole to experience it without sort of, all of the problems that come when you start spending 6 and 7 figures on projects. So thank you.
Fred, can I ask a question?
Sure, go ahead.
Wait till the next meeting, but just Fred, how flexible is this, in terms of trying something out? Like, will they be able to try out both sides of the street, or is it just this one scenario setup?
Well, I think this fits in with some of the concepts that we came up earlier this year, and we've been working with the Bicycle Club. They think it's a good setup. I mean, if it doesn't work, then we can change it up in the spring. But I think this is what we'd like to try out this fall. It would only be for Friday to a long week basically. But that's kind of what everyone thinks. That was the consensus.
Thank you. Very exciting.
Fred, can I ask why just a week?
Well, the idea was it would give us enough time to measure changes, to get a sense of what's going on, but also, it's temporary. It comes down soon, and we can do something bigger in the spring. The idea was we wanted to get something done this fall, which means a really lightweight project.
Agreed. Thank you. This is great.
Mona?
Yes, Mona.
So I think it's a great idea to try this out, save money for taxpayers, in terms of doing it in the other alternatives. My question is, in terms of safety and notice, what kind of communication will be put out to residents, but also not just residents, but also the neighbors on the street that generally park in some of these spots? So my concern is, number one, like safety and how we get that information out with signage or other things to make sure that people who usually travel these roads are aware that they have to be careful. I don't know. What are your thoughts on how is that going to work?
Well, some of it is going to be paint and highway signs. There's going to be a lot of new paint, temporary paint. And there are going to be some signs at the intersections indicating what's going on. One of those blocks, Forest to North Narberth, doesn't have much parking. People don't tend to park there because it's metered. The other block has more people parking there, so we'll need to reach out to the homeowners. But Sean, I don't know if you want to discuss that.
Yeah, we've met. Actually met today. We have a strategy in place to use our webpage, develop a press release, do some 3x5 cards, and reach out to the business association as a partner to get the word out. So we've got some homework to do.
So, and for could we also do leafleting of the immediate neighbors and save money from postage? I'd be happy to go drop them off myself, just so that the immediate neighbors will know what's going on.
We'll take you up on that.
I'm happy to do it.
We were planning on doing a target geography.
It'll give me a reason to get up and move.
Okay.
So just to be clear, when you say Forest to North Narberth, there's a part of Forest that you're looking to get involved in this. Yes, no, I'm asking.
Well, I don't think so, because right now, with the construction of 114 Forest, that section of road would not be available.
No, it would not. Okay.
Fred?
Yeah, I'm looking at the map. I believe it's from Forest to North Narberth, and that does not include the construction site. The construction site's on the other corner, right? So
that's right.
Yeah.
And I mean, it in another world, it might have been a nice part, because not a lot of people park there either, et cetera, but it's currently unavailable.
Yeah, the original proposal was to start a block west, which would have incorporated the construction site, and everybody pointed out that that's not feasible. So
if I can add something, I believe the only portion of Forest Avenue that's included is the little green hatch mark, and I'm butchering the technical term of it, that acts as a transition from anyone traveling northward on Forest Avenue. You can see where Fred's pointer is, over to the bike lane. So that's the only portion of Forest Avenue that's going to be directly influenced.
Gotcha. All right. Any other council member comments or questions on this, or mayors? No. Okay. I'll take a motion to adjourn, and then we will allow the public to exit. Yeah, I'll get you, Cindy. And then we do have to meet for a brief executive session. Mr. West, and then Councilor Rickards.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry to interrupt and prolong the meeting end, but I just wanted to give you a quick update that the streetlight retrofitting project is continuing to happen. We did receive our updated buyback agreement from PECO, and I'm pleased to announce that it's almost a 90% reduction in cost. Awesome. So must be the PUC was just like, no, you can't charge that much. That's ridiculous. So it was a $6,700 original cost. Now it's down to just under $800 for purchasing all of our streetlights. So that's going forward. We're still waiting on the specifics of. We've already paid for those lights. That was part of the original agreement. So now we have to wait for PECO to process the refund and then for us to then buy them back. So things are moving forward. I just wanted to give you an update, and hopefully sooner rather than later, construction will start.
Great, thank you. Cindy, and then anybody else.
I'm sorry, Mona talking about pamphleting or flyering the neighbors made me think of, do we have a communication plan for the mask ordinance? Will that lie in public health and safety? Should that come to FNA with the communication plan? Because I suspect that's something that we're going to want to be creative and really address.
Sean, I'll let you describe how the office plans to communicate this.
Yeah, thank you. Through our standard normal outlets, but I also took some notes that there was some comment about there being signs in businesses and parks. So we'll have to talk about what that looks like and the cost of, and how those should be designed and how they should be ordered.
Okay, so that's coming from the office and not a committee. Thanks.
Great. Anybody else before we adjourn? All right, I'll take a motion to adjourn. Is there a second? How about a first? Someone make a first. I shouldn't have done that.
I'll motion to adjourn.
We did it in reverse. Mona is time traveling. She made a motion. You already all seconded it. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. The public meeting is adjourned. We'll pause for a moment while we clear the room and allow the Civic Association to jump off. Thank you again for live streaming our meeting. Have a good evening.